Good afternoon and welcome to the latest edition of the Stargate franchise sci-fi cult classics documentary. I'm delighted this evening to be joined by Erik Breker, who played the role of Sergeant Reynolds in Stargate SG1. I suppose, Erik, start off. I suppose Stargate SG1 now is probably 2 decades ago, but in terms of its relevance even today, in today's world, and the amount of times it's been shown on TV channels all across the world, even on a weekly basis, it must almost feel like yesterday that you're almost on set.
Well, in a lot of ways, it certainly does. I'll still get I still get people stop me on the street, and I have to say, Jim, it was Sergeant Reynolds to begin with, but I made a lot of promotions over the years. I ended up as Colonel Reynolds, the fastest promoted character on the show, I have to say. But uh, I still get recognized from Stargate. It's a testament to my mom and dad's good genes, I think, more than anything. But uh, I talked with some people at one of the conventions when I was in Manchester, and asked them, me with my English degree, sitting around the table, I was by far the least educated person at the table, and I asked them, so why Stargate? What is it for you guys that really uh, resonates? And they they all talked about the hope that the show gives, like the medical cures, the travel, the having humans, having Earthlings being able to foster intergalactic peace, and strive for that. It really gives hope to people here who are just, they just want more peace in their lives. And I think now especially it really resonates with people because we want to look forward to a brighter future.
Yeah, I suppose, Erik, in terms of Stargate SG1, for every sort of good show, there needs to be a protagonist, a sort of a sinister element in it. But that sinister element, for especially in sci-fi, can sometimes be over the top, and it can be too imaginative in terms of its realism. But in
Right.
terms of enemies that were created in Stargate, most of the characters were mortals, albeit they had probably snakes in their heads, but 95% of them, it was more
Yes.
the whole sort of mortal sort of senses of greed, jealousy, love, loss, hatred, all the emotions that a mortal sort of goes through. So instead of getting these dragons or sort of three-headed sort of monsters that you see in other sort of sci-fi shows, that's a sort of an important element of Stargate's success in one sense, the realism of the sort of product. I know it's sci-fi, but try and create some bit of a realism in terms of the protagonist.
Well, and if as an audience member you don't relate to the protagonist, to the bad guy, if you don't relate to the protagonist in some way, then there's no conflict. You're strictly rooting for the good guy, and that doesn't make that doesn't make for compelling drama when uh, if they have a reflection of the human element. And I think that you've nailed it. Every single protagonist had some reflection of human element, had some foible, and unless you build that into them, then they're just strictly bad. Then they're just a monster, and uh, and people won't follow along. They won't see if there's any chance that they may redeem themselves, because that's all also part of what the joy of the show is, that they're these protagonists often had some quirk that was still, whether it's a charming personality, or whether they looked after their children, or whatever it was. There was always an interesting uh, humanistic balancing that would happen. So it's a it was a strong, I mean, the writing of the show really, and the years and years that those guys put the show together. It speaks to their ability to color a real creature.
I suppose that Eric, one thing that also struck me is if you've never watched the series before and you just turned on to say season 5, and that was your first element of Stargate SG1, and let's say you watched for random, say episode 10, you could watch that as a standalone episode, having never watched any sort of episodes of Stargate in the past, and it had its own. Every episode had its own sort of storyline, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So they all could stand on their own 2 feet every individual episode. They weren't depending on the episode before it or afterwards, especially those one-off episodes. I know there were some concurring episodes that went into the next sort of episodes, but very rarely most of the episodes were sort of one-off sort of shows. And that's very important as well, that if a new audience or new viewer member comes into the show, that they can sort of watch what they're seeing before their eyes and sort of relate to it. They're not sort of scrambling or saying, if I don't see what happened in season 1, episode 1, it's going to have a real effect on me in terms of season 6, episode 7, which is not the case.
Right. No, the stories were individual for sure, and every show, the SG team all stayed within. I mean, over the years they developed somewhat, but they really did sort of stay in their path. Daniel was always Daniel. Jack was always Jack. They stayed on their line. So I would imagine over time, as an actor, it becomes very comfortable to be in that. But I would think that, I don't know. I've never brought this up with Amanda or any of the other cast that I occasionally see. Did the sameness of it get tiring? And so I'd be interested to know if they really wish they could have broken out and done more, a bigger variety of things.
Yeah, I suppose that Eric, before I bring you on to how you got cast in the role, is it fair to say the character Jack O'Neill became a sort of sci-fi legend? And in terms of Richard Dean Anderson, in terms of his success, the character Jack O'Neill was probably more prominent or known to people in terms of the sci-fi world than actual Richard himself. And so that's how much the character had a sort of an appeal to it. It was almost like a borning of a real classic sci-fi domino character effect, or it sort of the Jack O'Neill character just took off really.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's the James T. Kirk of Stargate, right? He not that's not a comment on his acting, but it's certainly the character has had that prominence. Yeah.
And I suppose that Eric, I'm just going to ask you now about your own background in terms of Stargate SG1. Well, I suppose Stargate had been around there for a season or two before you got your break in it. And how did the opportunity come about for you to get cast in the role of starting off with Sergeant Reynolds and then obviously being Colonel Reynolds? Was the role designed for you, or was it something an agent brought it to your attention, or did you have to go through numerous casting auditions, or was it a producer rang you and say, "Listen, I've got a role in mind. I think you could be perfectly suited for it"?
No, it was definitely it was me and a dozen other guys who went out for Sergeant Reynolds initially. Um, I had gone out for probably 4 or 5 parts leading up to that, auditioning, and wasn't right for whatever reason for those, and luckily Robert decided, okay, and now's the time to bring me on, and it was great. I got to work with Tom Macbeth in that first episode, and he was at that point he was still just kind of uh, an early recurring character, and so we had we had a good day. I knew Tom from before, but yeah, they used to have auditions in a trailer in one of these sort of um, Atco trailers. They're a temporary housing sort of trailer, and that's where the auditions were, in the lot at on Boundary Road at Brooksbank there, not at Brooksbank, but on Boundary Road Studios there, the old Stargate Studios. So there was only room enough for 3 or 4 people to sit actually inside. And if you needed to still run your lines, or if you needed to sort of not interact with other people, you stand out in the parking lot. And cars going by, and you see some sets or some doors that open, and you'd see somebody come in and go out. And but there wasn't a whole lot of glamour initially. It's a step up from a porta potty, and you go into a tiny little room and do your best, and walk away and wait to hear. And fortunately for me, like I say, Robert Cooper was, said, okay, gave me the nod at that point, and the character developed from there.
Yeah, I suppose, Eric, you mentioned sort of the acting sort of audition process in terms of how humble it was, in terms of how small it was, and then you arrive the first day on set in terms of Stargate SG1, a massive sort of production, huge money pumped into it. You started taken back when you walked around the multiple sets for the first time in terms of the sheer enormity of the project, and almost like, I've got myself onto a runner here. I need to hold on to this baby for as long as I can.
No, I'd done a bunch of X Files before that, and so had a little bit of understanding of the sort of scope and grandeur of a big TV show. Uh, the sets were really impressive, I have to say. Yeah, walking into that was, but we weren't. We were in a tent structure that they had built. We were on a location somewhere else. I can't even remember. I think we were out in Surrey, and that they had built this office space for us, and it's fairly early days for me in terms of being an actor. So everything seemed overwhelming back then. Just every single thing seemed overwhelming. But they were already into production a few years when I came on, and everybody, the communication and the well-oiled machine that was the production crew at that point, they already had shorthand. They communicated effortlessly. There was a real there was almost a military feel to the production, because people knew their jobs, and they got to their jobs, and everybody tried to make it as short a day and as happy a day as possible, though. So it was very impressive to walk on, and just everybody got to it. And so as a day player, though, the challenge with that is you're just a little stone in the big Stargate ocean, and the waves wash back and forth, and sometimes you get spit out on the beach, and sometimes you end up in the craw of some big fish. And luckily, I just was able to sort of ride that wave with the production, and yeah, Sergeant Reynolds became Captain Reynolds, became Lieutenant Reynolds, became Colonel Reynolds. So it's I was fortunate enough that that they saw something in me that was I was a smart military guy. That's what Robert Cooper said to me when I asked him why me. He said, I can get any jarhead to play a military guy, but when I need somebody to come in and play a smart military guy, I've thought of you. And so I was very fortunate that he didn't know me that well. So
I suppose, Eric, one thing when you arrive on a set like that, your first interactions with some of the main cast obviously leaves a sort of mark and a resonance on you. And I know I've spoken on one or two characters, but the character Christopher Judge played, he was a very much a strong sort of a henchman type of guy, a man of few little words for all sort of action. But speaking to a few people, they said he was a very nice guy, down to earth, very comical, laugh about, sort of joking sort of guy who liked a bit of crack and amusement. Very different to what you see on terms of your screen, this sort of serious one-liner type sort of guy. So was he able to just switch on and switch off a drop of a click of a fingers or a drop of a switch?
oh yeah, no, Chris. Well, that's the joy of the makeup and the forehead insignia and the costume and everything. He didn't have to do much to be imposing. He
Yeah.
really didn't. So I think he learned early on, the less he did, the scarier he was. So they'd yell cut and he'd be laughing and joking, but as soon as they went to action, like it was he's a big, strong, imposing guy, and so the less he did, the scarier he was. So when he would really sort of drop down and be still, that you never knew what could happen. So it was fun to watch him. Yeah. And he really does. He has some great stories. He's a true raconteur and uh, uh, loves to laugh. He really does.
I suppose that, Eric, in terms of that sort of military sort of faction, in terms of Stargate sort of SG1 and the line of authority as such, it almost felt like sometimes Stargate, the main characters, the hero in Stargate, they were fighting two battles, one in different planets and then one on their home ground for this, their home planet as well, for in terms of respect and admiration for the work that they were doing, because it was almost feeling like they were every time the sort of people that were supposed to be at their backs were trying to stab them and take the glory for the work that they were doing themselves.
Yeah. I, I think it's not so much a military as a government organization. Trying to do good works on one side and being attacked from the other. It's quite a common happenstance in any level of government. So it's they have their struggles certainly here on Earth.
And I suppose that, Eric, in terms of Stargate, one of the big sort of moments over the seven sort of seasons was the actual death, the on-screen death of the Dr. Janet Fraser sort of character. And that showed sometimes that even in wars and battles, even in sci-fi, that sometimes it doesn't always have a happy ending. And for most episodes in Stargate, you almost felt that it was going to have that sort of happy ending every time. And I suppose that brought a sense of shock to the Stargate fan base, but probably made it respected more in terms of realism, because it made the fan base wondering what's going to happen next. If they can do that to a character that's been there for 3 or 4 years, they can do it to anyone.
Yeah. No, I think uh, I think that goes back to the characters wanting more edge. What you said about tuning into an episode and it not having being a standalone thing. I think the actors too wanted more edge, wanted more gravitas, and certainly having one character killed off, it definitely lends itself to that.
And I suppose, Eric, the sort of final question for me now towards you, and it's probably one of the most difficult questions I was in this and then to you in terms of speaking to cast members. If I want to put the character Colonel Reynolds in a Stargate sort of dictionary, and they left two blank sentences underneath, and they ask you, Erik Breker, who's played the character Colonel Reynolds, to write those two sentences, what would you like those two sentences to read?
If it was, sorry, if it was in a comic strip, did you say, or
If a Stargate dictionary was created,
a dictionary? Oh,
Colonel, yeah,
uh, uh,
tricky one, I know, but a good one.
well, I think Colonel Reynolds always wanted Jack's job would definitely be one of, yeah, would definitely be one of the sentences. The other is uh, uh, SG3 does it easier than SG1.
On that note, Erik Breker, a pleasure talking to you this evening, reliving your memories of Stargate SG1 and your role as Colonel Reynolds. No doubt, Erik, a real prominent time in your career as we speak now, going into the 21st century. It seems that the attachment to Stargate in terms of you and your life is only growing stronger. It's not sort of diminishing. And well, it's the same. Well, it's like James Bond. Once you're part of the fraternity, you're always being part of the sort of fraternity. Pleasure
Yes.
talking, Erik, today, and best of luck in your future endeavors, and stay safe in these troublesome times.
Thanks, Jim. It's been a real pleasure. And yes, be safe, be well. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Okay.